Welcome, everybody, to Degrees of Science. I'm First Alert Meteorologist C.D. Finley, and with the official start of winter just being a few weeks away, many people are wondering how our winter will actually look here in Central Texas. And so our friends over at the National Weather Service in Fort Worth have actually released a winter outlook for this upcoming season, and I'm here with First Alert Meteorologist Sean Bellafiore to kind of help break it down a little bit. So before we get into the forecast, let's talk a little bit more about what a climate outlook actually is. So here's the winter outlook for 2024-2025, again, provided by our friends over at the National Weather Service in Fort Worth. And basically what a climate outlook is, it doesn't really attempt to predict the weather. It's really difficult to really go out that far long range and, get as high resolution data as we usually do, say with our closer range models and stuff like that. And it really just provides the likelihood that temperatures and total precipitation will be, say, above or near or below average for that particular period of time. So in this particular period of time, we're talking about roughly December through February. And so it also provides how drought conditions are favored to change based off of those temperatures and precipitation totals. And it doesn't really predict season snowfall amounts either, and it really just considers the course of the entire season. So this isn't for any particular day or any particular event. This is basically an entire look over the entire winter season. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it, Sean. So as you can see here, the winter outlook for 2024-2025, we're looking at the temperature outlook there. And we're looking at the temperatures being above average for this time of year. So, Sean, what are your takeaways from our 2024-2025 temperature outlook? What do you notice?
Yeah, we've kind of been experiencing it in Central Texas, across the entire state, actually, already so far as we kind of transition from summer into eventually winter. We really haven't gotten fall just yet. We've had a couple of tastes here and there, and I think that's kind of what we're going to be expecting this winter. The big headline, when we talk about a good chance of an above normal amount of or above normal temperatures and a good chance of below normal amounts of precipitation, that is a classic La Nina setup. And La Nina is starting to emerge already in the near coastal waters off the in the eastern Pacific or off of the coast of South America. And even though we're talking about the Pacific Ocean off South America, it's El Nino, La Nina has such a big impact on the climate across the United States that's really where we look whenever we give these outlooks. Because remember, just like you mentioned, we're taking a look into the future well past what forecast model data is considered reliable for. So we kind of have to use our past experiences to determine what could be happening, in the not so distant future. I mean, we're talking February. It's already, 3 months away at this point.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, even just based on past experiences, I mean, even thinking about October, right? We set the 14th driest October on record, I believe, if that's correct.
14th driest, the hottest as far as the average high temperature, and second highest for the average temperature, the high and the low average together.
Yeah, so it's kind of already a continuing trend of what we've already experienced, even just in this past month. So, I mean, it's no surprise that we're expected to see some more above average temperatures here as we head into the winter season. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the precip as well. It's kind of more of a continuing trend there as well, so to speak. More below average temperature, precip in terms of rainfall amounts here as we head into the winter season. I mean, we kind of already, as we just mentioned a moment ago, October was the 14th driest on record here in Central Texas, which means we're likely going to continue that trend just based on previous experiences and, like you said, with La Nina as well. But I also want to note here, and it has this note here on the slides as you take a look here, does not necessarily mean that there won't be any winter weather events. I mean, even kind of going back to previous La Nina years, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe 2021 was a La Nina year.
Yeah, triple dip La Nina. It was the winter of 2020 to 21, 21 to 22, and 22 to 23.
Yes, and it was in that period of time, and I believe it was 2021 as well, that we saw the big rain or snowfall amounts with what many people call Snowmageddon.
Snowmageddon, yeah, the COVID snowpocalypse is what we've heard, but the February 2021 was unlike anything Texas has seen. On a local scale, parts of North Texas has seen those type of temperatures before. Central Texas has, but it's kind of on the extreme level. And then just thinking back to it, back in 2021, freezing temperatures got all the way down past Galveston, and we even saw snowfall as far down south as the coast. So even even though it was a La Nina year, that does not mean warmer temperatures, below normal precipitation. Something could definitely happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was going to say, just like we said, looking back at that does not necessarily mean we're saying no winter events. It just means overall for the entire season, we may be looking at below average precipitation. That includes both snowfall and rainfall, things of that nature. But that doesn't mean one event can't necessarily be as crazy as what we saw back in 2021. So
yeah, and we want to say that we're not forecasting another
right.
February 2021.
Yeah, that's not true either. We're looking. I mean, yeah.
If that is going to happen, that's something that would be like 7 to 10 days out that we would be able to forecast. But this is an overall outlook. One of the things that when we're talking about winter precipitation, especially in a La Nina winter, one of the stats that was mind-boggling to me is that there has been some sort of wintry precipitation recorded in Central Texas every single winter since World War II. So just because we may not see a snowmageddon, a couple inches of snowfall, a couple of inches of ice, doesn't mean that we can't get, maybe one day of freezing drizzle, or maybe one day of a little bit of sleet, or even a bit of snow. It's just typically those La Nina winters tend to trend a little bit drier, not only on the rainfall, but also the wintry precipitation too.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, again, with the precip, looking at below normal precip for the upcoming winter season, and as we just hit on a moment ago, doesn't mean that one event can't necessarily happen, doesn't mean it won't happen either. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on forward from there. So kind of basing off what we kind of mentioned it a little bit already, but what actually goes into these climate outlooks, right? So as Sean has been already talking about, we kind of look back at what's going on with the past, because as Sean mentioned, those forecast models that we typically use only go maybe a week out in advance, and even then there's kind of varying reliability with those forecast models, which is why we have multiple forecast models to look at, not necessarily just relying on one model data. So with that in mind, what actually goes into a climate outlook? And Sean, would you like to kind of emphasize what's going on here?
Yeah. So when you're talking about the overall climate, remember climate and weather are not the same things. They are related. The weather, I always say this whenever we do our school visits, the weather is what you get and the climate is what you expect. So when we talked about October being the hottest October in history with the average high temperature, we didn't expect that. That's what actually happened. Normally, October is when we start to cool off. We get some cool shots here and there. So when we're talking about a longer term climate, what we tend to look at as forecasters, and especially the folks at the Climate Prediction Center, they are great at what they do when they issue these winter outlooks, is they look at different teleconnections. So we take a look globally. I mean, the weather that we see here in Central Texas typically starts in Eastern Asia and moves across the Pacific Ocean down from the West Coast into Central Texas. And then the weather from, say, the East Coast goes all the way over to Europe. So it's all connected. And when we see signs that different things in different areas may change in one way or another, that's how we can kind of get a little bit more or a little bit less confidence as to what we may see in the coming weeks and months. So when we have this background of a La Nina winter that's emerging, that's kind of a baseline of, okay, we're expecting it to be warmer and drier than normal. Is that going to happen? That could also depend on a couple of different factors, but generally, I think that trend is going to hold true. We've kind of been seeing it leading into, as we've transitioned from what was an El Nino summer into kind of this neutral phase, late summer and early fall, and now really getting into La Nina, late fall and into winter. That's really when things are going to, start to emerge as far as those patterns.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say kind of hitting on La Nina and El Nino, that's all big part of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, right? So that's what these climatologists and meteorologists are looking at when they come up with these outlooks. And as you said, we're kind of looking back at historical events and what's going on just basically all across the world. I mean, believe it or not, pretty much everything that's going on weather-wise across the world has some level of impact on what's going on with your weather locally. And so that's why we're looking at these kinds of outlooks and historical data to kind of just get an idea of what might actually happen within the season. So yeah, that's basically what we're looking at here. We're looking at the ENSO, or El Nino Southern Oscillation, if you want to spell the acronym out. But yeah, that's what we're looking at here heading into the climate outlook here. So moving forward, obviously we're turning into a La Nina season, right? As you kind of already hit on a moment ago, we had an El Nino summer. Now that we're kind of switching into that neutral phase and going into La Nina. what do we typically see with La Nina? As you can see here on the slides, we usually see above average temperatures and below average precipitation. And that's why, we're predicting that we're likely going to see exactly that, above average temperatures and below average precipitation. That's just what we've seen historically speaking. And so as we kind of move through that, let me get my slides go there. There we go. How reliable are these winter outlooks when we're talking about La Nina and El Nino and looking at historical data? Well, when we're talking about temperatures, we can kind of rely on it. And Sean, if you have anything you want to add on to this, feel free. But majority of La Nina winters in Central Texas since 2000 have been reported as above normal with average above normal average temperatures, that is. And so with that said, Sean, do you have anything to add on to that?
So this is kind of where the whole weather and climate thing kind of contrast with one another, because we're here telling you that the winter is most likely going to be a lot warmer than normal, but at the same time, we just talked about in the same breath that 2021, we had the deep freeze across Texas, and it usually is that type of a winter whenever La Nina emerges. You typically get these long spells of not terribly much going on as far as precipitation or cooler weather goes, but then every now and again you usually get one big shot of Arctic air in Texas. Sometimes you can get multiple ones of them, but it's less lingery, I would say, and more kind of transient, moving its way through. So we're also talking about a 3-month outlook. The weather is what you get for that day, but overall, if we take the weather for 90 days, 3 months, and average it together, that's what we mean when we say an above normal temperature forecast.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just the temperature. I mean, we're also looking at precip outlook as well. And based on what the National Weather Service has sent us over, precip is actually a little bit more reliable. It's a good start in terms of, kind of forecasting what the precip might be for the entire season. About 80% of the La Nina winters in Central Texas since 2000 have actually reported below normal average precipitation. That also kind of hits on yet again, talking about 2021. One particular event could do a lot, but in the course of a whole season, how does that one particular event kind of actually make a dent in terms of what that precip totals are for the entire winter season? So with that in mind, still expecting a below normal season in terms of precipitation for the winter. So it is a little bit more reliable, but that doesn't necessarily mean we won't see one particular event, as we've kind of already hit on. And it's kind of, in terms of winter precipitation, it's actually a matter of if, not a matter of when. Or not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. Let me flip that around there. All but 2 winters since 1950 have actually had some type of winter precipitation in Central Texas, that being, ice, sleet, or snow.
So there you go. I said earlier, since World War II, we haven't. But so 2 winters, but, we're talking 70 years. There's only been 2 times that wintry precipitation has not fallen. It's kind of the same thing. We expect triple-digit temperatures in Central Texas every single summer, but there were 2 years that we had no triple-digit temperatures at all. So, overall, we are expecting wintry precipitation at some point.
Right, exactly. When I was going to say, the National Weather Service here points out, winter precip amounts have ranged anywhere from a trace amount to that 9 inches of snow that we did see back in January and February of 2021.
And that was 2 separate snow events, which was kind of mind-boggling in and of itself, is that not only did we have a very good snowfall at the kind of middle to the end of January, it was then immediately followed up by what happened in February 22, that, kind of snowmageddon in Texas. I remember actually looking out my window, forecasting that January snow. I was like, man, this is really cool. We're not going to probably see another snow like this again this year. It's La Nina. It doesn't typically happen. And then, a couple weeks later, that's when everything got chaotic.
No, absolutely. When I was going to say, kind of moving forward from that too, so Sean, in your experience, obviously you've been here a lot longer than I have. In your experience, how reliable have these winter outlooks been for you in your tenure as a meteorologist?
I think generally they have been. The winter is kind of the weird season for us because, we can sometimes be a little bit too far south for that cold air riding with the Pacific, or mostly in the winter case, the polar jet stream. It doesn't get that cold that often in the La Nina winters because that polar jet gets kind of stuck up to the north. We've seen it already a little bit in October and in November. We've had cold fronts that have passed through. Some of them have brought us a little bit of cooler weather. Some of them have brought us a little bit of rain. But when you're thinking a cold front, you're typically thinking a big cold snap or a lot of precipitation. And some of these fronts have come through dry. So I think that trend will continue. We're going to get these changes every now and again. Typically, whenever we get into winter, it's about 5 to 7 days that we get a cold front kind of in that window. We cool down for a couple days, warm back up. But I think the reliability is pretty good for La Nina winters. The problem is the lack of moisture, honestly. Yeah. And not only just the lack of moisture that's coming in, say, from the subtropical jet stream from the Pacific Ocean, but also sometimes we don't get strong enough winds coming off of the Gulf of Mexico to bring in the Gulf of Mexico moisture. And then Texas has been getting deeper and deeper into a drought. We did really, really well in spring, especially in May, our rainiest month in history. And then we just completely shut the faucet off for, almost 5 months now at this point. So it's not only Central Texas that's dry, it's also West Texas that's dry too. And if you think about where these storm systems come from, they come from West Texas. And if West Texas, is a little bit drier, they don't get the moisture moving in, then that's another kind of layer into why we may not see quite as much precipitation during those La Nina winters.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was going to say, even as you mentioned a moment ago, we were already kind of in a drought, and so it kind of stands to reason that, since there's not going to be as much precipitation, we're probably not going to be busting any drought, conditions anytime soon. So that is another thing that I didn't really hit on with the slides here, is that there's another slide talking about how not only is the drought likely to stick around and maybe even expand if we don't see as much winter precipitation, but the fire danger could be an issue too, especially if the winds start to pick up in the winter, and like you said, with that cold front that we see about maybe every 5 to 7 days could spark those winds up a little bit more. So fire danger could also be a concern, believe it or not, into a winter such as the one that we are expecting to see. So
yeah, and when we talk about those cold fronts in La Nina winters, a fair few of them have their origins in the Pacific Ocean. So yeah, there is some moisture associated with them usually, but instead of getting that what Texans call the true blue northern cold front, where everything just comes spilling in from Canada across the country, those Pacific cold fronts typically bring us more of a westerly wind. And just like I mentioned a moment ago, if West Texas is dry, all that dry air that's coming from the desert Southwest and West Texas, that helps to drop the dew point. And when we're talking about low dew points, dry air is really nice for us sometimes. We don't have to deal with the sweatiness, the stickiness, but the dry air, like you mentioned, those strong winds, and if we are expecting warmer than normal temperatures, that's like 3 out of the 4 major ingredients that you need for grass fire and wildfire danger. I'm kind of concerned about this upcoming winter, and even leading into the upcoming spring season as well, because if we're already starting with the dry ground, we're already starting with dry vegetation, and it probably will get a little bit worse, and especially when those big storm systems kick up the winds, the embers of those grass fires really can take off.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be something to look out for as we head in the winter season as well. And just kind of in summary here, just kind of summarizing everything that we have talked about here, what we do have high confidence in. We do have high confidence in La Nina conditions. We've already started to see that kind of settle in, as Sean mentioned just a moment ago, which means warmer than normal temperatures are really more likely than, say, below normal temperatures. But Arctic air let me get my words right. Arctic air will still arrive. As we mentioned a moment ago, we do start to see those kind of Arctic cold fronts move in about every 5 to 7 days in the winter season. Rainfall amounts are still forecasted to be below normal, much like we saw even in this past October. With that in mind, though, drought conditions will also likely still continue with that lack of rainfall and winter precipitation. And that means there will likely be an enhanced threat of wildfires this winter. And as Sean mentioned a moment ago, maybe even into the spring season as well, with that lack of moisture and that lack of rainfall. And there's a reduced risk of heavy rain and flooding events, and there's also a high chance that at least one winter weather event will occur. I mean, that is pretty typical with La Nina season, for case in point, 2021, that, as we've hit on several times now.
And even the following year, 2022, it wasn't quite as bad, but we had another significant ice storm the following year in another La Nina. So
that was another,
history shows us.
I want to say we've had a lot of La Nina years recently, it seems, too. So
yeah.
And then what we're a little bit less confident of, how much above the normal temperatures will actually be. We know they were going to be above normal. We just don't know how far above normal they could actually be, and how much below normal the seasonal precipitation totals will be either. Same thing can apply to the rainfall amounts or the snowfall amounts in that case. We just know they're going to be above normal. We can't get an accurate number of specifics on how far above normal that will be. And then we are also a little bit less certain of the frequency and severity of the Arctic outbreaks this winter. As Sean and I hit on a moment ago, that's what our kind of short range forecast models are for. And about 5-7 days out is what we usually are more reliable in terms of the actual forecasting. So we won't know more about that until the time actually comes to start forecasting that.
And I do want to point out, just kind of in discussion about the long range forecasting. As of this recording, which is just after Veterans Day on the 12th, we are already looking at our first shot of Canadian to near kind of this Arctic air mass moving in, and that's 10 days away as we approach our Food for Families food drive. So right around that November 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, we're about 10 days out from the time of this recording, and we're expecting that Arctic air outbreak. It's November, so it's not the February Arctic air outbreak, but we've gotten really, really skillful over the past couple of years at predicting these cold weather events at least a week usually before they happen.
Well, I was going to say, even adding on to that, before we see that big, giant, strong cold front move in, likely by the middle or the start of next week, we're expecting another cold front even as soon as tomorrow. I mean, today's Tuesday, or the day after Veterans Day. Heading into tomorrow afternoon, we got another cold front rolling through. And as you mentioned earlier, lack of moisture kind of on the other side of that front, right? This is actually expected to be a more dry front that has a lot of dry air in behind it. So that's kind of another indicator that we're heading into La Nina, is just the lack of moisture on the leading edge of that front.
And if you get the drier cold fronts, they keep coming through. They push the humidity away. It kind of just compounds itself. Dry front after dry front makes the drier and drier. You need more moisture to get the rain going.
Yep.
So fingers crossed that something changes, because boy, are we hurting for some precipitation here in Central Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're kind of a little bit less certain of. Again, once the time comes, we'll be able to start forecasting that thing once it gets into the range of our model data. And we're also kind of unsure, not only the number of intensity of these winter events, but the subseasonal anomalies may reduce or reverse the warm and dry trend this winter. So there's certain things that could actually happen within this winter season that might reverse the trend a little bit. So, and those are things that we're not capable of predicting this far out either. And so, as you mentioned a few moments ago, there's a lot of other things that go into predicting these kind of outlooks. We're solely based on historical data and how things have gone for us in the past with these La Nina winters. So, thank you all so much for tuning in, and of course, we'll keep you updated on how this winter will actually turn out in the coming weeks. And Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and thank you for tuning in. Hope you have a great day.